In 1835, nestled in the Scottish town of Dunfermline, a boy named Andrew Carnegie entered the world, born into the modest home of a weaver. Little did anyone know, this young boy would one day etch his name into the annals of American history as an unparalleled success story. Andrew's early life was characterized by hardship. His father, William Carnegie, a master weaver, faced the harsh realities of the Industrial Revolution, which swept through Europe, rendering skilled artisans jobless as machines replaced human labor. The Carnegie family teetered on the edge of poverty. Margaret, Andrew's mother, proved to be a beacon of strength. She started a small sewing venture, supplementing the family income as her husband struggled to adapt to the changing economic landscape. The young Andrew observed his parents' tireless efforts, instilling in him the enduring values of hard work, dignity, and unwavering perseverance. In 1848, when Andrew was just 13 years old, the Carnegies made a monumental decision to leave their homeland behind and journey to America, the fabled land of opportunity. The transatlantic voyage was arduous and long. After weeks at sea, they arrived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, a burgeoning industrial hub filled with the clamor and promise of work. Life in America was far from easy. The family squeezed into a cramped rented room, and Andrew had to work to support them. His first job was as a bobbin boy in a cotton factory, earning mere cents per week. He endured 12-hour shifts in grueling conditions, but he remained uncomplaining. During the evenings, he sought refuge in the local public library, a sanctuary where knowledge was freely available. Colonel James Anderson, a kind benefactor, opened his personal library to underprivileged working boys every Saturday. Andrew voraciously consumed books on history, science, and the lives of great entrepreneurs. Those books, he later reflected, gave me hope and the understanding that learning could unlock success. Eventually, Andrew secured a position as a telegraph messenger boy for the Ohio Telegraph Company. His sharp intellect and impressive memory quickly distinguished him. He could recognize handwriting and memorize telephone numbers with ease. His intelligence caught the eye of Thomas A. Scott, a leading executive at the Pennsylvania Railroad Company. Scott became a mentor to young Carnegie, taking him on as his personal assistant. This mentorship marked a pivotal moment in Carnegie's life. Under Scott's tutelage, Andrew learned the intricacies of managing people, the nuances of investing, and the complexities of large systems. He realized that railroads were the lifelines of modern America. Controlling them meant controlling the nation's future. By his early 20s, Andrew had become one of the most promising young men in the railroad industry. However, his talent for investment truly set him apart. When his mentor suggested he invest $500 in railroad stock, his mother sold her few prized possessions to make it possible. That decision proved transformational. Carnegie earned his first real profit, not through physical labor, but through astute insight and foresight. He came to a profound realization. Hard work ensures survival, but understanding money can set you free. That guiding principle would remain with him as he ascended from a poor immigrant boy to become the steel magnate of America and, eventually, one of the world's most generous philanthropists. With his initial investments yielding returns, Andrew Carnegie was far from content. The 1860s heralded America's industrial boom. Railroads expanded, cities grew, and the nation clamored for iron, coal, and, above all, steel. Carnegie recognized early on that steel would form the bedrock of the modern world. At the time, steel production was costly. However, a groundbreaking method had recently emerged in England, the Bessemer process, allowing for faster and cheaper steel production. When Carnegie learned about it, he saw an opportunity that eluded others. Leaving the railroad industry behind, he ventured into steel, a decision that would reshape history. His first venture, the Keystone Bridge Company, aimed to replace wooden bridges with steel structures. Many scoffed, deeming it foolish due to steel's high cost. However, Carnegie believed that innovation would soon make it affordable. He was correct. His bridges proved stronger, safer, and more durable than any built before. As America expanded its infrastructure, railways, factories, buildings, and bridges, the demand for steel soared. Carnegie understood that true success lay not in selling steel, but in controlling its production from start to finish. This marked the genesis of vertical integration, a concept that became the cornerstone of his empire. He began acquiring iron mines, coal fields, rail lines, and shipping companies, ensuring that every aspect of production remained under his control. This allowed him to lower costs and dominate his competitors. In 1875, he established the Carnegie Steel Works in Homestead, near Pittsburgh, one of the most advanced steel mills globally. Carnegie was more than an entrepreneur. He was a visionary industrialist. He believed that great industries must be built upon great organization. He implemented a system of efficiency, data, and discipline that was ahead of its time. With partners like Henry Clay Frick and Charles Schwab, Carnegie transformed Homestead into the epicenter of American steel. Annually, thousands of tons of steel streamed from his mills, shaping skyscrapers, railroads, and bridges throughout the nation. Yet beneath the veneer of progress, tensions simmered. Carnegie's relentless pursuit of efficiency often pushed his workers to their limits. Long hours, hazardous conditions, and meager pay. Whispers of strikes began to circulate, foreshadowing future conflict. Still, Carnegie maintained his conviction. First, make wealth, then use it for good. He was not heartless. Far from it. Having experienced poverty firsthand, he held deep respect for the working class. However, he believed that the best way to aid them was not through charity alone, but through creating opportunities through progress. By the 1880s, Carnegie Steel had become the largest steel producer on earth. While others faltered, he thrived through continuous reinvestment, innovation, and efficiency. He abhorred war and once wrote, "There will come a time when the sword will be replaced by the plowshare, and steel will build rather than destroy." To him, steel was not a weapon but a symbol of peace and progress. As the century drew to a close, Andrew Carnegie stood as one of the wealthiest men globally. Yet, a haunting question lingered within him. If I die rich, have I truly failed in life? That question would steer the remaining years of his life, transforming a man of industry into a man of purpose. The years following 1870 heralded the start of Andrew Carnegie's evolution from a prosperous businessman to one of the world's most influential industrialists. The steel industry was transforming America, and Carnegie was determined to be at the forefront. Railroads expanded westward, skyscrapers pierced the sky, and bridges spanned the country, all requiring stronger, cheaper materials than iron could offer. Carnegie foresaw the future in steel. He had studied the new Bessemer process, a groundbreaking method developed in England that enabled molten iron to be converted into steel efficiently and at a reduced cost. While many American businessmen hesitated to embrace it, Carnegie wholeheartedly adopted the innovation. In 1875, he launched his first major steel plant, the Edgar Thomson Steel Works, near Pittsburgh, named after the president of the Pennsylvania Railroad, one of his key clients. The factory was a marvel of modern engineering, noisy, hot, and pulsating with the energy of progress. The Bessemer converters glowed with fiery light as molten steel was poured into molds. Carnegie insisted on relentless innovation, faster production, improved quality, and lower costs. "Watch the costs, and the profits will take care of themselves," he frequently said. His obsession with efficiency became legendary. He reinvested profits into new machinery and research, hiring the best engineers and scientists to refine every stage of production. The result was astounding. By the 1880s, Carnegie Steel was producing more steel than all of Great Britain's mills combined. However, Carnegie's empire was not solely built on technology. It was also built on strategy. He implemented a vertically integrated system, controlling every stage of production, from the iron mines and coal fields to the railroads and shipping lines that transported raw materials. By owning everything, he eliminated middlemen and controlled prices, making it nearly impossible for competitors to match his efficiency. Still, behind the glittering success lay dark shadows. The steel mills were harsh places to work. Laborers toiled 12 hours a day, 6 or 7 days a week, surrounded by heat, noise, and danger. Many were recent immigrants, Irish, Polish, or Italian, who accepted grueling conditions for low wages. Carnegie publicly professed concern for his workers, yet he drove them relentlessly and kept wages low to maximize profits. His business philosophy was straightforward but ruthless. cut costs or perish. While he believed in self-improvement and education, he also believed that fierce competition weeded out the weak. To him, capitalism was akin to evolution. Only the fittest survived. In the 1880s, Carnegie became one of the wealthiest men in America. He built grand mansions, traveled across Europe, and engaged with intellectuals, writers, and politicians. Yet, he remained deeply proud of his humble Scottish roots. He loved to recount the story of how he had once worked for a few dollars a week as a bobbin boy. It was his favorite illustration of American dream, proof that through determination and skill, anyone could rise from poverty to power. Yet, a new tension began to emerge within him. The same man who pushes workers to the limit also began writing essays on moral responsibility and the proper use of wealth. He was haunted by the idea that great riches came with great duty. In his mind, money was not meant to be hoarded but used to improve society. He began to think less about how much he could accumulate and more about the legacy he would leave behind. However, before he could turn to philanthropy, there was one more battle to fight, one that would test his values, his empire, and his conscience. By the early 1890s, Andrew Carnegie's empire stood as a symbol of American industrial might. His steel mills produced the backbone of the nation, rails, bridges, ships, and skyscrapers. Yet, behind a veneer of progress, a storm was brewing. The burgeoning labor movement demanded fairer wages and improved working conditions, while Carnegie's managers were determined to maintain low costs. This conflict would soon erupt into one of the most infamous labor disputes in American history, the Homestead Strike of 1892. Carnegie was in Scotland at the time, enjoying the tranquility of his castle in Skibbo. In his absence, day-to-day control of the company rested in the hands of Henry Clay Frick, his tough, uncompromising partner. Frick believed that unions were a threat to industrial progress and must be crushed at any cost. He was a man of cold efficiency, precisely what Carnegie needed to maintain record profits, but the complete opposite of Carnegie's public image as a benevolent employer. The Homestead plant, one of Carnegie's largest steelworks near Pittsburgh, had been unionized for years under the Amalgamated Association of Iron and Steel Workers. The workers were skilled, proud, and determined to protect their rights. But when their contract was set to expire in 1892, Frick demanded major wage cuts, arguing that falling steel prices required adjustment. The workers refused. Frick responded by locking them out and surrounding the mill with barbed wire, effectively declaring war on his own employees. Tensions reached a boiling point on July 6, 1892, when Frick hired 300 Pinkerton detectives, armed guards meant to break the strike and secure the factory. When the barges carrying the Pinkertons arrived, they were met by thousands of angry workers and townspeople. The confrontation quickly turned violent. Shots rang out over the Monongahela River. By the end of the day, 7 workers and 3 Pinkertons were dead, and many more were injured. Blood stained the waters of Homestead. News spread across the nation, shocking the public. For years, Carnegie had preached about the harmony of capital and labor, yet now his company had become a battlefield. Though Carnegie later claimed he had not authorized Frick's actions, few believed he was completely innocent. After all, the steel baron had approved the wage cuts and chosen Frick for his toughness. The Pennsylvania State Militia was eventually called in to restore order, but the strike was broken. The union was destroyed, and Carnegie Steel resumed operations under stricter control. Yet the victory came at a terrible cost. Carnegie's reputation as a compassionate employer was shattered. Newspapers portrayed him as a hypocrite, a man who spoke of peace while profiting from suffering. Frick himself narrowly escaped an assassination attempt by an anarchist outraged by the violence. While he survived, the event deepened the public sense that industrial America had become a battleground between greed and humanity. For Carnegie, the Homestead tragedy was a wound that never fully healed. Though he tried to distance himself from it, his conscience was burdened. He began writing more frequently about morality and wealth, publishing essays that would later be collected as The Gospel of Wealth. In it, he argued that the rich had a moral duty to distribute their wealth in ways that improve society, through education, libraries, and culture, rather than leaving it to heirs or hoarding it. His words were sincere, but many questioned whether they were enough to erase the suffering of his workers. Still, Carnegie seemed determined to change course. The Homestead strike had shown him the limits of power and the consequences of unchecked ambition. From that moment, his focus began to shift, from building an empire of steel to building an empire of generosity. The flames of Homestead had burned away the last illusions of harmony between wealth and labor. But for Carnegie, they also lit a new fire within, the fire of redemption. After the tragedy at Homestead, Andrew Carnegie's life entered a new chapter, one defined not by factories and profits, but by reflection and atonement. He was no longer the man who spent sleepless nights calculating production costs or driving managers to push for higher output. Instead, he turned his mind towards something grander, how to use his immense fortune to uplift humanity. By 1901, Carnegie made a decision that would forever define his legacy. He sold his empire, Carnegie Steel, to financier J.P. Morgan for the astonishing sum of $480 million, equivalent to more than $15 billion today. Overnight, he became one of the wealthiest men in the world. But Carnegie's goal was never simply to accumulate wealth. It was to give it away. When Morgan congratulated him on the sale, Carnegie smiled and said, "Now I can retire and begin the serious work of giving away my fortune." And that's exactly what he did. He began building libraries, thousands of them. Carnegie believed that knowledge was a true key to progress, and he wanted every person, regardless of their background, to have access to it. Between 1883 and 1929, he funded over 2,500 public libraries across the world, from small towns in America to cities in Canada, the UK, and even Australia. To him, a library was not just a building of books. It was a doorway to opportunity. But his generosity didn't stop there. He established Carnegie Mellon University, then called the Carnegie Technical Schools. In Pittsburgh, founded the Carnegie Institution for Science in Washington, D.C., and created the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, one of the earliest organizations dedicated to global diplomacy and understanding. In total, he gave away more than $350 million, nearly 90% of his wealth, an act unprecedented in history. To Carnegie, philanthropy was not charity, it was duty. He wrote in the Gospel of Wealth that the man who dies rich dies disgraced. This philosophy guided him in every gift he made. He saw his fortune as a trust, something to be returned to society for the greater good. Still, the ghost of Homestead never fully disappeared. Critics reminded him that his generosity was built on the sweat and suffering of steelworkers. But Carnegie seemed determined to make peace, not only with the world, but with himself. He spoke often about peace among nations, denouncing war as the foulest blot upon civilization. His last years were devoted to promoting global harmony, even funding the Peace Palace at The Hague, which still stands today as a symbol of justice and international law. In his later life, Carnegie withdrew from the bustle of business and politics, preferring the quiet of his estate in Scotland. There, surrounded by books and nature, he wrote memoirs, letters, and essays filled with optimism and reflection. Though his health began to fail, his spirit remained unbroken. "I have had a wonderful life," he once wrote, "and the only question now is how to make the lives of others as wonderful." On August 11, 1919, Andrew Carnegie passed away peacefully at the age of 83. His death marked the end of an era, the age of steel and steam, but his vision lived on. The libraries he built continued to enlighten millions. The institutions he founded went on to advance science, education, and peace for generations. Andrew Carnegie's story is not one of perfection, but of transformation. He rose from poverty to power, from ambition to atonement. He built an empire with iron, but he redeemed it with wisdom. In the end, he proved that the true measure of greatness is not how much one acquires, but how much one gives. And so, the man once known as a Steel King became something greater, a builder of minds, a servant of peace, and a believer in humanity.